Welcome to the lost pages of history. Today, we delve into one of the greatest enigmas the ancient world has ever known: the sudden, complete disappearance of Rome's legendary Ninth Legion. Over 50,000 soldiers, an entire legion, vanished from the records, leaving behind a silence that has baffled historians for nearly 2 millennia. But what if the truth is not just a simple story of a lost battle? What if their fate was something far stranger, something that defies our understanding of history? A recent explosive discovery threatens to rewrite everything we thought we knew. Deep in the peat bogs of northern Germany, hundreds of miles from where the Ninth was last seen, an artifact has been unearthed that simply should not exist. It's a Roman aquila, the eagle standard, the sacred heart of a legion, and initial analysis suggests it belongs to none other than the Ninth. How could this be? The official story places them in Britain, fighting Pictish tribes, but this eagle, found so far from its supposed battlefield, whispers a different, more chilling tale. It suggests they didn't just vanish in the mists of Caledonia, it suggests they were taken. For decades, we've been told a simple story. The Ninth Legion marched into the Highlands of Scotland and was annihilated. But this eagle standard, this impossible artifact, demands we reconsider. The location is the first clue. Why Germany? There were no known campaigns for the Ninth there at that time. The condition of the eagle is another. It's remarkably preserved, not a relic of a frantic, bloody battle, but almost as if it were carefully placed. It doesn't scream of defeat. It whispers of a ritual. Some modern theorists, once dismissed as fringe thinkers, are now gaining traction. They point to ancient local legends from the discovery site, tales of men of iron who appeared from a shining cloud and were taken by the sky gods. Coincidence? Perhaps, but combined with a Roman legion's eagle turning up in the same area, it paints a picture that is hard to ignore. The theorists propose a radical idea. The Ninth Legion wasn't wiped out by barbarians. They encountered something else entirely, something not of this world. Could it be that the entire legion, with its men, its equipment, and its sacred eagle, was literally lifted from the face of the earth? It sounds like science fiction, but the evidence, as strange as it is right in front of us. This eagle standard, found in an impossible place, is our first tangible proof that the history we read in textbooks is only part of the story. The truth of the Ninth Legion might not be buried in the mud of Britain, but written in the stars. Before we dive deeper into this startling new theory, let's journey back to ancient Rome. The Legio IX Hispana, the Ninth Spanish Legion, was a formidable force. Forged in the fires of the Republic, they fought alongside Julius Caesar in Gaul. They were veterans, a hardened fighting machine that had secured victories across the known world. Their reputation was legendary, their loyalty to the eagle unwavering. The aquila, the eagle standard we mentioned, was more than just a symbol. It was the soul of the legion. To lose it was the ultimate disgrace, a fate worse than death. The Ninth story takes a pivotal turn when they are stationed in Britannia. The Roman conquest of Britain was a brutal, drawn-out affair. The native tribes, particularly the Picts in what is now Scotland, were fierce and unrelenting. Our last definitive record of the Ninth Legion comes from around the year 108 AD, where they are recorded as part of the garrison at Iberacum, modern-day York. After that complete silence, they are conspicuously absent from a list of Roman legions compiled in 165 AD. It's as if 50,000 men, their families, and their equipment simply ceased to exist. So where did they go? The absence of evidence has fueled centuries of speculation. It's a historical vacuum, and nature, as they say, abhors a vacuum. For generations, the mystery of the Ninth has captivated the imagination of historians, archaeologists, and storytellers alike, each attempting to fill the void with their own theories, each trying to solve the unsolvable. The most popular and widely accepted theory for centuries was simple and brutal. The Ninth marched north of Hadrian's wall to quell a Pictish rebellion and was wiped out to the last man. This narrative is compelling. It paints a picture of heroic Romans making a last stand against overwhelming odds in a misty, savage land. This idea became so entrenched in the popular imagination that it was accepted as historical fact for generations. It's the story many of us learned in school, a neat, tidy, and tragic end to a legendary legion. Another, more mundane theory suggests there was no catastrophe at all. Some historians argue the ninth was simply transferred from Britain to another part of the empire, perhaps to the east, to fight in the Parthian Wars. The loss of records, they argue, is not unusual for the period. Bureaucracy, even Roman bureaucracy, was not perfect. In this version of events, the legion may have been disbanded or merged with another unit and slowly faded from history. A far less dramatic end, but a plausible one. But here's where it gets interesting. Modern archaeology has started to poke holes in these traditional explanations. The idea of a single cataclysmic battle in Scotland has found little to no supporting archaeological evidence. No mass graves, no battlefield littered with Roman armor. It seems unlikely that an entire legion could be annihilated without leaving a trace. The transfer theory also has its problems. While possible, the complete lack of any administrative record for such a major troop movement is highly suspicious, and this brings us back to our impossible artifact, the Roman eagle found in Germany. It invalidates the tidy narrative of a slaughter in Scotland. It also makes a quiet transfer to the east seem less likely. The eagle acts like a key, unlocking new doors of possibility while firmly shutting others. It forces us to ask unsettling questions. If the ninth wasn't destroyed in Britain and they weren't transferred to the east, where did they go? Why would their sacred eagle, the very soul of their legion, end up buried in a German bog, hundreds of miles from where they were supposed to be? The old theories crumble under the weight of this new evidence. They feel too simple, too terrestrial. The eagle doesn't just suggest a different location. It hints at a different kind of event, an event so strange that traditional history has no framework to contain it. The silence in the historical record might not be due to a lost battle or a misplaced scroll. It could be the sound of 50,000 men being taken out of history itself. Now, let's confront the truth we've been building towards, that incredible, controversial artifact, the Roman eagle standard found in a German bog, the one that points to aliens or an otherworldly event. It doesn't exist. It's a fiction, a narrative device, but it's based on something very real, a hoax. I'm not talking about a recent hoax, but a grand, elaborate piece of historical fiction crafted in the 18th century. During the Enlightenment, there was a fervent romanticism for the classical world. A German antiquarian, seeking to create a grand national epic that rivaled the tales of Greece and Rome, fabricated a story. He wrote a lost chronicle detailing a fantastical journey of a Roman legion, our Ninth Legion, that, instead of being defeated, marched east, encountered mystical Germanic tribes, and eventually ascended to a mythical realm. He even forged artifacts to support his tale, including drawings of an eagle standard found in a bog. His story was a masterful blend of known history and pure fantasy, designed to be believable. This fabricated history was so compelling, so well crafted, that it took on a life of its own. It tapped into the human desire for mystery and a story grander than simple facts. It explained away the lack of evidence by creating an even more fantastic explanation. Over time, the lines blurred. The hoax became intertwined with the genuine. Historical mystery, creating a powerful myth that has echoed through the centuries, inspiring novels, films, and yes, even wild theories about extraterrestrial encounters. The evidence we presented, the impossible location, the local legends, the pristine condition of the artifact are all classic elements of this long-running fiction. There was no eagle in the bog. There was no shining cloud. There was only a story created to give a romantic answer to an unanswerable question. So, while the shocking claim that propelled our story was built on a historical fiction, it highlights a crucial point. The true mystery of the Ninth Legion is so profound that we are willing to believe almost any explanation, no matter how outlandish. Stripping away the hoaxes and the science fiction, we are left with the cold, hard, and fascinating truth. We simply do not know what happened to them. Were they annihilated in Britain, the evidence now lost to time? Were they transferred and disbanded, their records vanishing in the chaos of a crumbling empire? Or is the truth something no one has yet imagined? The absence of an answer is what makes the fate of the Ninth Legion one of history's most enduring and captivating mysteries. It's a powerful reminder that the past is not always a closed book. Sometimes pages are not just turned, they are torn out, leaving us to wonder and to search, forever drawn to the allure of the unknown. The Ninth Legion may be gone, but their ghostly presence will continue to march through the lost pages of history. The Roman Ninth Legion, a force of over 5,000 elite soldiers, vanished from the pages of history. The mystery isn't a myth. It's a genuine historical puzzle. The question isn't if they disappeared, but how, as we dive into the most famous, most brutal, and most widely believed theory, that the Ninth Legion marched north into the mists of ancient Scotland and was wiped out to the last man. To understand this theory, you have to understand the world they were sent to conquer. Roman Britain wasn't a peaceful province. It was a frontier, a raw, bleeding edge of the empire. In the early 2nd century AD, the northern border was a place of constant, vicious warfare. The Romans called the land Caledonia, what we now know as Scotland. And the people who lived there? They were some of the most ferocious opponents the legions ever faced. The Romans called them the Picts, the Painted Ones, for their practice of painting their bodies before battle. They were masters of guerrilla warfare, appearing from the mists to strike hard and fast, then melting back into the unforgiving landscape. This wasn't a war of pitched battles and open fields. It was a bloody, grinding insurgency fought in dense forests, treacherous bogs, and chilling fog. This was the cauldron of violence into which the Ninth Legion was last seen marching, a place where entire patrols could vanish without a trace. The stakes were absolute survival. So what evidence points to a total, catastrophic defeat? The clues are compelling, but they're not what you might expect. First, there are the Roman writers themselves. The historian Tacitus, whose own father-in-law governed Britain, described the northern tribes as unconquerable freedom fighters who would rather die than be enslaved. He wrote of savage ambushes and terrifying night raids that nearly destroyed the Ninth on a previous campaign. The Romans knew exactly how dangerous these people were. Then there's the wall, Hadrian's Wall. Think about the sheer scale of that project, a 73-mile-long stone barrier cutting the island in two, garrisoned by thousands of troops. You don't build a fortress that massive out of casual caution. Historians argue it's an imperial-sized reaction to a traumatic event. A disaster so profound that the Emperor Hadrian decided to abandon conquest and instead build a permanent, uncrossable line. He wasn't just marking a border. He was building a tombstone for Roman ambition in the north, perhaps prompted by the loss of an entire legion. And finally, the most powerful piece of evidence is silence. After roughly 108 AD, the Ninth Legion is never mentioned again in any Roman military records in Britain. No muster rolls, no pay records, no officer appointments. They just stop. For a bureaucracy as meticulous as Rome's, this administrative silence is deafening. The simplest explanation is often the correct one. There was no one left to report back. The legion was annihilated so completely, so utterly, that the news itself died with them. It's a chilling, cinematic story. A legion marching to its doom against a savage enemy. It's the story that has fueled novels and movies for decades. But there is a colossal problem with this theory, a ghost at the feast. Where is the battlefield? For more than a century, archaeologists, historians, and treasure hunters have scoured the Scottish landscape. They have been searching for the final resting place of the Ninth Legion. A battle involving over 5,000 legionaries against a tribal army would have been a massive, bloody affair. It would have left a footprint. We should find something. A mass grave filled with Roman skeletons. A field littered with broken swords, shattered shields, and thousands of Roman hobnails from their military sandals. Most importantly, we should have found the legion's eagle standard, the Aquila. Losing an eagle was the ultimate disgrace, and the Romans would go to incredible lengths to recover one. Its capture would have been a monumental victory for the Picts, yet in all of Scotland, in all of northern England, we have found nothing. Not a single piece of definitive archaeological evidence that points to the last stand of the ninth. No battlefield, no eagle, no legion. How can a battle of that magnitude, a disaster that supposedly reshaped imperial policy, simply leave no trace? It's a hole in the center of the annihilation theory, an absence so profound it calls the entire story into question. So, while the image of the ninth being swallowed by the Scottish mists is a powerful one, it remains a theory built on circumstantial clues and haunted by a lack of physical proof. The silence in the records and the construction of Hadrian's Wall are strong arguments, but the missing battlefield is an undeniable counterpoint. The mystery endures. If the legion wasn't destroyed in Britain, it begs an even more incredible question. Where did they go? The answer might not lie in the cold, damp forests of the north, but thousands of miles away, in a land of scorching sand and forgotten empires. We now follow a trail of evidence that leads us far to the east, to a surprising and controversial new theory about the fate of the lost legion. As we stood on the misty moors of Caledonia, searching for the ghosts of the Roman Ninth Legion, the story of a heroic last stand against Celtic warriors is powerful, a tale etched into our popular imagination. But as we discovered, it's a story without a stage, a battle without a battlefield. The archaeological evidence simply isn't there. So we are left with a chilling question. If the Ninth Legion wasn't wiped out in the north, then where did 9,000 of Rome's finest soldiers go? The answer might not lie in the cold mists of Britain at all. To find it, we must leave the British Isles behind and travel 2,000 miles east, to the sun-scorched deserts of the Parthian frontier. What if the Ninth wasn't destroyed but simply moved? To understand this theory, we need to understand the Roman war machine. Think of the Roman Empire not as a static map, but as a living, breathing organism. Its lifeblood was the legions. These weren't just fortress garrisons, rooted to one spot for generations. They were mobile, strategic assets, the emperor's chess pieces on a board, that spanned from the Atlantic to the Euphrates. A legion could be stationed in Germany one year and marching through Syria the next. Their movements were dictated by the ever-shifting currents of imperial policy and military necessity. They went where the trouble was, and in the early 2nd century, the trouble, the real existential threat to Roman power, wasn't in the damp fringes of Britain, it was in the east. There, Rome faced its only true rival, an empire that could match it in wealth, sophistication, and military might, the Parthian Empire. For centuries, these two superpowers had been locked in a Cold War, punctuated by brutal, bloody conflicts over control of the rich trade routes and buffer kingdoms that lay between them, places like Armenia and Mesopotamia. While the governor of Britain was dealing with skirmishes against scattered tribes, emperors like Trajan were planning grand campaigns involving hundreds of thousands of men, campaigns aimed at crippling Parthian power once and for all. The British frontier was a sideshow. The East was the main event. It was the place where emperors won their greatest glory and where legions faced their toughest tests, and it was a meat grinder. The Eastern campaigns were notoriously costly in terms of manpower. Rome constantly needed to funnel fresh, experienced troops to the front. This is the foundation for the Eastern transfer theory. Proponents argue that with the situation in Britain relatively stable after Agricola's campaigns, the Ninth, a veteran legion, was simply too valuable to be left on a quiet frontier. The logical move would be to redeploy it to where it was needed most, the brewing conflict with Parthia, and we actually have some tantalizing evidence that points in this direction. The last definitive record of the Ninth in Britain is from York in the year 108 AD, but after that, the trail doesn't go completely cold. It just moves. Inscriptions have been found in Nijmegen, in the modern-day Netherlands, a major Roman military base on the Rhine. These inscriptions record the presence of a detachment, a vexillation, of the Ninth Legion. They were there building something, likely part of a transfer from Britain back to the continent. This is crucial. It shows that elements of the Ninth were on the move after they supposedly vanished from Britain, from Nijmegen, a major hub on the Empire's military road network. The path east was wide open. The journey to the Syrian frontier would be long, but for a Roman legion, it was standard procedure. So the theory goes like this: the Ninth packed up its standards from York, sailed to the continent, and marched east, disappearing from the records of Britain not because they were dead, but because they were no longer there. It's a clean, logical explanation that fits perfectly with Roman military practice. No bloody battle, no heroic last stand, just a transfer order signed in a distant palace in Rome. With such a compelling military and logistical case, the search for the Ninth then shifts to the vast landscapes of modern-day Turkey, Syria, and Iraq, the former battlegrounds of Rome and Parthia. Archaeologists and historians have scoured this region for decades, hoping to find the definitive clue, the smoking gun that would place the Ninth in the east. What would that look like? It could be an inscription on a building, a dedication to a god by a soldier of the Legio IX Hispana. It could be a tombstone, like the many we find across the empire, naming a soldier, his rank, his legion, and his final resting place. Or it could be a mention in the historical accounts of the Parthian Wars, a line from Cassius Dio or Arrian recording the Ninth's participation in a great battle. The problem is, we have found absolutely none of it, nothing. The sands of the East are as silent about the Ninth's fate as the hills of Scotland. Of all the legions known to have served in the region during the great campaigns of the 2nd century legions like the 3rd Gallica, the 4th Scythica, the 12th Fulminata, the 9th is conspicuously absent from every single record. There are no building stones, no altars, no tombstones of its soldiers. We have found graves for men from dozens of other legions who died in the East, but not one for a soldier of the Hispana. This silence is deafening. While the transfer theory is perfectly logical from a strategic point of view, it suffers from exactly the same fatal flaw as the annihilation theory in Britain, a complete and total lack of hard physical evidence. As we go on our next trail, the trail that began so promisingly in Nijmegen seems to vanish into the dust of the Syrian desert. So where does that leave us? We've followed two trails, chasing the ghost of the Ninth Legion from the cold mists of Caledonia to the burning sands of Parthia. Both paths led to dead ends. The story of their annihilation in Britain is a myth without a battlefield. The story of their transfer to the east is a logical theory without a single piece of proof. The legion marched out of the historical record, seemingly into thin air. It feels like we're back where we started, with one of Rome's greatest mysteries deeper and more intractable than ever. But there is one final, disturbing possibility we have yet to explore. We've looked for the Ninth in battles against Rome's enemies, but what if the answer lies not with an enemy, but within the legion itself? What if the legion wasn't destroyed or transferred, but disbanded in disgrace? This takes us to the final installment of our investigation as we explore the darkest theory of all: mutiny, disgrace, and a secret Roman cover-up designed to erase the Ninth Legion from history itself. In our journey to find the Ninth Legion, we've chased shadows across the Roman Empire. We've walked the misty highlands of Caledonia, searching for a battlefield that doesn't exist. We've sifted through the sands of the Middle East, looking for records that were never written. We've considered a catastrophic annihilation, yet found no evidence of a final, glorious stand. We've explored the idea of a simple transfer, yet found no trace of their arrival at a new post. Each path has led to a dead end, a frustrating silence. The external explanations have failed us. So now we must turn inward. We must consider a possibility far darker than any battle. What if the Ninth Legion wasn't lost in the fog of war? What if it was deliberately, systematically, and completely erased from history? For a Roman legion, honor was everything. It was the bedrock upon which the empire was built. Each legion had its own identity, its own history, its own sacred eagle standard, the Aquila, which embodied the very soul of Rome. To lose that standard was a disgrace beyond comprehension. A legion could fall from grace in several ways. It could suffer a defeat so total, so humiliating, that its name became a curse. Think of the disaster in the Teutoburg forest, where 3 entire legions were wiped out, their eagles lost to the Germanic tribes, the shock of This defeat echoed through Rome for generations. Or a legion could commit the ultimate act of betrayal, mutiny, refusing orders, turning against a commander, or attempting to install their own emperor was treason of the highest order. Such an act would stain the unit's legacy forever. There was also the possibility of mass cowardice, a collective failure of nerve in the face of the enemy. In the rigid, unforgiving world of the Roman military, such a stain was indelible. The punishment for these failures wasn't just decimation or disbandment. For the most profound disgraces, Rome had a special terrifying sentence. It was a punishment known as damnatio memoriae, the damnation of memory. This was a fate reserved for the worst traitors, the most hated emperors, the ultimate enemies of the state. It was a sentence considered worse than death. Execution ended a life, but damnatio memoriae sought to obliterate a legacy. It was the state-sanctioned act of wiping a person or an entire entity from the historical record, as if they had never existed. Imagine the process. Teams of stonemasons would be dispatched across the empire. On victory arches, on public monuments, on military diplomas, they would find the disgraced name and meticulously chisel it out, leaving a conspicuous gaping hole in the stone. Statues would be torn down and melted. Coins bearing the condemned face would be recalled. All official records, Senate decrees, military rosters, legal documents would be burned. The name would be struck from every list, every inscription. The goal was total oblivion. A deliberate, systematic silence. Now consider the mystery of the ninth, the lack of records after the year 120, the sudden stop. The missing tombstones of its veterans. The silence isn't an accident, it's not a gap in our knowledge. This theory proposes that the silence itself is the evidence. The Ninth Legion wasn't lost. It was the subject of a successful damnatio memoriae. Their crime, whatever it was so great that the Roman state itself conspired to make the world forget. So where does this leave us? Is this the final answer to our 2,000-year-old question? We must be honest. Just as there is no grave marker for the legion in Caledonia, there is no single surviving imperial decree that reads, "The Ninth Legion Hispana is hereby damned." No such document has ever been found, but perhaps we shouldn't expect to find one. If the erasure was successful, the order for the erasure would have been destroyed along with everything else. This theory is powerful because it turns the entire problem on its head. Every other hypothesis is weakened by the lack of evidence, but for damnatio memoriae, the lack of evidence is precisely what you would expect to find. The total administrative silence, the way the legion vanishes from all official accounts, the abrupt end to the careers of its officers, it all fits the pattern. The scattered, uncertain mentions that do exist could be the last fading whispers that escape the official purge. This chilling verdict suggests the Ninth Legion committed an act so shameful, so treasonous, that Rome sentenced it not to death, but to nothingness. It was a ghost long before it became a legend. And so our search concludes where it began, with a mystery. We have weighed the evidence for annihilation, for transfer, and for disgrace. While the theory of a state-sanctioned erasure, a damnatio memoriae, seems to fit the strange silence surrounding the Ninth more neatly than any other, it remains just that, a theory. The absolute truth of what happened to the men of the Legio IX Hispana is a secret that history has kept well. Perhaps that's why this story continues to fascinate us, centuries after the last Roman soldier fell. The fate of the Ninth Legion is a stark reminder that history is not just a collection of facts, but a narrative shaped by those with the power to write it and to erase it. The Ninth Legion may have vanished from the records of Rome, but it marches on still, not across the moors of Scotland or the deserts of Judea, but in the vast, unconquered territory of our collective imagination. A timeless symbol of the lost pages of history and the enduring power of a good story. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.